What's up, Fox10 Fox here. Today we're taking a look at the big, hot, and heavy R9 390 from AMD. Now, the specific model that I have is the Red Dragon from MSI, which bolsters a whopping 8 gigs of GDDR5 VRAM, which is mind-boggling considering the fact that this card came out June 15th of 2015, and to this day, cards with 8 gigs are still considered high-end. The Radeon R9 390 gaming 8GB from MSI has a core clock of 1060 MHz in OC mode, 1040 MHz in gaming mode, and 1000 MHz in silent mode. It has a power consumption of 275 watts, requires a 6-pin and 8-pin connector, and does support DirectX 12, but unfortunately, driver support has ended on this behemoth. The last driver was 21.6.1. With that said, I'm still going to try and throw some modern games at it, so let's get started. First game up on the list is Stray, the lovely cat game. At 1080p with the high settings, we saw an average frame rate of 77, a 1% low of 42, and a 0.1% low of 3. Now, that 0.1% low didn't happen very often, if at all. I didn't notice it while I was playing the game, so it might have been during loading screens or something. But overall, the 390 ran Stray perfectly fine. Perfectly fine. Elden Ring up next ran a little bit worse than I expected. Now at 1080p with the medium settings, we saw an average frame rate of 38 and a 1% low of 32 and a 0.1% low of 32. So although there wasn't any stutter to speak of, the fact that it only clawed about 38 FPS is kind of mind-boggling to me, considering this is an 8 gig card, and Elden Ring, although modern, isn't incredibly hard to run. I've seen 1060s run at about the same, which is where the 390 kind of sits. But even still, I kind of expected more, considering the VRAM. And what makes it even more confusing is that Spider-Man Remastered at 1080p with the medium settings ran way better, and it's a newer game. I guess technically it came in on PS4, so it's not as graphically impressive, but the remaster still is quite demanding, yet we saw an average frame rate of 60 with a 1% low of 31 and a 0.1% low of 16. So overall, a really good experience. When you're actually exploring in the town and swinging around and things like that, you might see below 60 FPS, but I think medium is a perfect combination of visuals and FPS. Mafia Definitive Edition up next at the 1080p with the highest settings, ran with an average frame rate of 61, a 1% low of 38, and a 0.1% low of 20. So good results throughout, except this game scared me because I thought that my graphics card was dying because the screen started to flicker. So I'm worried about this because if you've been looking in the top left corner when it comes to temperatures, I get like 94 degrees Celsius on this card sometimes, which is just mind-boggling. Keep in mind, I also have the fan curve set to 100% 24/7 because this card has been so hot. This is my first ever graphics card. I've had it since 2015, and it has always run like this. So when I saw flashing in Mafia Definitive Edition, I thought that my graphics card was dying because it was just finally cooking itself to death. But I continued forward and I started doing demanding games again to see if the card would continue to glitch, and it didn't. So the game that I tested to see if the graphics card was dying was Cyberpunk 2077. At 1080p with the high settings, I saw really impressive frame rates and I had no issues whatsoever. It ran better than Elden Ring, which is surprising. I saw an average frame rate of 49 with a 1% low of 37 and a 0.1% low of 21. So there wasn't even that much stutter to speak of. And this was through the benchmark, which took it through the paces, and it ended up with a pretty fine result considering Cyberpunk 2077 is still notoriously hard to run. Now Halo Infinite was the first game where driver issues set in. I was curious as to why it was running so poorly. I was getting 18 FPS in some of the recordings, which I'm showing you now. Eventually it ironed out and we got a frame rate of 37, a 1% low of 29, and a 0.1% low of 24. So you're getting a somewhat 30 FPS experience. It's not what I would consider to be playable because some games are going to destroy. And the reason why is because the drivers are outdated and Halo Infinite does not like these old drivers. So it is the first game I actually might have to give the unplayable seal of disapproval to for the R9 390, and it shows the beginning of the end for these graphics cards. I was running it at low with the target 60 FPS mode, and even still, I was lucky to squeak out 37 FPS. Tiny Tina's Wonderlands at 1080p with the medium settings, however, ran very well, with an average frame rate of 69, nice, a 1% low of 58, and a 0.1% low of 45. So not even any stutter to speak of or anything like that. It ran perfectly fine, which granted it is Tiny Tina's Wonderlands. You could crank it up to high if you wanted to, but high for some reason crashed my game, and I just decided to stick with whatever preset it gave me, which was medium. So keep that in mind. It did crash. I don't know why, and I think it was probably just a one-off instance, but at the same time, R9 390 is absolutely so incredibly hot that I wouldn't be surprised if it started breaking. And last but not least, I did Far Cry 6. At 1080p with the medium settings, we saw an average frame rate of 61, a 1% low of 47, and a 0.1% low of 33. So overall, a really good experience. Far Cry 6 runs great at 1080p on this card. Now, should you buy this card in 2022? Now, if drivers were still supported, I would say probably yes. Now, another thing that's concerning is how hot these cards get. If you know anything about AMD, their older graphics cards absolutely were hot as hell, and this is no exception, which is why it's difficult for me to recommend this card, because as time goes on, the 94 degrees Celsius cap that they have might just start to cook these graphics cards, and because it is now a 7-year-old GPU, you might be more likely to see problems. With that said, if that's not something you're concerned about, I still think going for a 1060 or an AMD, whatever is close to a 390, like a 470 or something like that, would be a better option, just because those graphics cards still have modern drivers, whereas this one is outdated and it will start to run into more and more issues as time goes on. So unfortunately, I can't recommend this, which is so sad because it was my first ever graphics card and I loved it to bits, but unfortunately, I think in 2022, it's time to retire this thing. So thank you so much for watching this video. If you liked it, like, subscribe, do what you're usually doing as always. Buy yourself something nice.